Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about histograms. Make sure that you have this worksheet in front of you, and we are going to go through a new way to talk about data. Remember, we've talked about dot plots as a way to talk about data, where we graph them and we put the dots above the numbers. We've talked about stem and leaf plots as a way to talk about numbers. We've talked about box and whisker plots to talk about numbers. So this is just another way to show our data and give information to people. So a histogram is kind of like a bar graph, but it represents the number of frequencies and it has numerical intervals. Whereas bar graphs, what you're used to and what you've seen, have categorical. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. But let's talk about intervals today. So intervals are always along the horizontal axis, that bottom axis, and the vertical axis shows how many times something happens. So for example, if you look at this graph here, it said birds at the feeder. So how we would read this is at the bottom, I would say, oh, okay, there are 1 to 4 birds at the feeder 8 or so times a day. Or this is going to say, okay, there are 5 to 8 birds at the feeder, 4 times a day. That's a lot of birds. Look, there's 13 to 16 birds at the feeder, maybe once a day. So do you see how that kind of shows you how many, you can look at how many birds there are and how often it happens. So there's 13 birds at the feeder once a day, somewhere between 13 and 16. So those intervals do give us information, but they aren't super specific. So let's talk about the different ways you can analyze this. Remember, statisticians never forget their socks. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do socks for this histogram about the birds. So S stands for the shape. Is it symmetric or is it not? So the shape of this, it's not symmetric. Please be writing what I'm writing. I need to see this. S, it's not symmetric. We do know that there are also no gaps in the shape. No gaps in this histogram. And typically in a histogram, you're not going to see very many gaps unless there's no spaces in the interval, okay? But when you're making the histograms, make sure that the bars are touching each other, but they're not overlapping each other. All right, so S stands for symmetric or not. O stands for outliers. And in this histogram, I really don't see any extreme outliers. Maybe this one here, but there's information in between here as well. So I'm going to say that there really aren't any outliers there. C stands for the center. And so the center of our data means, can we find the mean? Can we find the median? And unfortunately, in a histogram, you really can't give me a specific mean or median, but I can tell you kind of where it's close to. And usually the mean or median is kind of around the peak a little bit, or where most of the data is. So we can kind of talk about the mode with the center of a histogram, or the peak of the data, and that's happening between 1 and 4 birds. So I can say that most of the data falls between 1 to 4 birds. Okay, most of my data falls between there. So our center, again, mean and median, we can't actually calculate it because we don't have a data set that I could count in or add them all up and divide by how many there are, but I can look at where that peak is. All right, and finally is the S, which is the spread. Now from a histogram, I can't give you specific information because I'm not sure if this number in here is really a 13 over here or if it's a 16, but I can tell you roughly around what the spread might be. Remember, spread is how far apart it is, the range of it. So roughly the biggest number is going to be 16, maybe it'll be 13, 14, 15. And the smallest number would be 1. Like that's the max and the min for sure. So my spread is around 15, or the range is around 15. Okay, so let's go ahead and actually make one of these. So this is example 1. And I went around and I asked several students to count how many text messages they sent yesterday. I did this yesterday, so the day before. And so here's what they said. One of them said 18, one of them said 20, 22, 26, because everyone's on Snapchat now anyway, right? So looking at all these numbers, I give you the intervals. We need to take these text messages and we need to put them in our frequency chart. So I'm going to be looking how many text messages are between 1 and 7, and so on and so forth. So here's how I do it. I take the first number, 18. Okay, I'm going to put a tally mark here at 18. Cross it off. 20. Okay, it happens between here and here. Take a tally mark, cross it off. 22, 1 here. Take it, cross it off. 26 goes here, and so on and so forth. 10 goes here, cross it off. 12, cross it off. 16 goes here. 18 goes here. 7 goes here, and 8 goes here. So now I've got my tally marks, and I can make my histogram. So between 1 and 7, I only had one spot. So I'm going to go to the edge, and I'm going to make one spot, and I'm going to kind of shade it in like this. Between 8 and 14, I had 3. So I'm going to make my bar graph go up to 3, come over, come down, and kind of shade it in like this. From 15 to 21, I had 4. So I'm going to go between 15 and 21, up to 4, go down, kind of shade it in. And between 22 and 28, I had 2. So it kind of looks like this. And if I look at this graph, bam, I have my histogram. And now I can go ahead and talk about the shape, the outliers, the center, and the spread. Did I do that right? Yes. So let's talk about the stocks of this. The shape of this is pretty symmetrical. If you see here, you know, that goes up to the peak and then it comes down. So I would say this is pretty symmetrical. No outliers really that I can tell. The center for mean and median, I could go ahead and calculate that, but I would have to use these text messages numbers here. So for my center, I'm just going to talk about where most of the data is and where the mean and median probably are going to be. So most of my data is between 18 and 14 and 15 and 21 in there. So I know that my mean and my median are going to be somewhere between 18 to 21, probably closer to that 14 to 21, because that's where most of my data is. So mean, median, mode, remember, all are going to be around the same thing, and that really is going to look like the mean, the median, the mode are going to be right in this center part of this data. Okay, and my thing's going crazy. And the spread of this, again, if you look here, it's saying the highest number is 28, but in my data set, I didn't have a 28. So that's why it's hard for me to tell the exact range of something. Sorry, this was going to be the most. I didn't write this down. And the spread of this data, again, there's not a 28 here, so when you just get a histogram, it's really hard to see the exact range of it, but you can give a guess. Now, I could take my exact data and actually find the range, the max minus the min, if I wanted to. So I'm just going to skip this one for now, but I think you get the idea. All right, it is your turn. Here is the picture of Kim's graph, and here is the information. So if you notice, they give you your intervals. Over on the side, let's make a chart. And I would like you to go ahead and put your intervals in here. So the first one's going to be 1 to 2. The second interval they gave you was 3 to 4. And I need you to make a frequency chart. Put your information in there. Go ahead and graph it. And then I do need you to answer this question. What does this shape tell you about Kim's ratings? Okay, so pause the video. That's for you to do. Okay, so this is the information that I got. Check it with yours. I have my intervals here, most of my data, and this is the important part. Most of my data is around 7 to 8. So on average, she really got around a 7 to 8 type of score. That's what I can tell from a histogram. Now, I could go through and calculate the mean and the median, and you could see where it exactly falls, but we're not going to do that with this problem. So what I need you to do is you are on your own for the rest of the worksheet. Go ahead and do that, and then you are going to check it with me at my station. Good job, guys.